Well, hi there again, and welcome to session 4 in our study in the book of 2 Timothy. This study is called Opposition to the Gospel. You might remember from our last study that Paul warned Timothy about the presence of false teachers, men who would sneak into the church and they would twist and swerve the gospel message to suit their own ends. Paul encourages and challenges Timothy to respond by proclaiming the truth of the gospel, and by doing that with gentleness and patience, in the hope that some of these false teachers might hear the truth of the gospel, repent, and be restored to a knowledge of the truth of Jesus Christ. Well, into today's study, we're into chapter 3, and in the very first verse, Paul says that maybe there is a time coming when even that gentleness and patience won't work. Look with me at verse 1. But understand this, in the last days there will come times of difficulty. Timothy, you can practice all the gentleness and patience in the world that you want, but at some point in these last days, times of difficulty are still going to come. Life and ministry for you, Timothy, and for anyone who seeks to proclaim the truth of the doctrine of Jesus Christ will get very hard. And from verse 2, Paul explains why there's this huge list of vices there that sort of talks about all these sins and things that people will abandon the love of Jesus for. And from halfway through verse 4, he kind of sums them up with a couple of statements. Lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Timothy, there are going to be people who will love their own pleasure rather than loving God. And while they're not loving God, they will still have an appearance of godliness, but it won't have any real power in their lives. These are people who put on a show on Sunday. They proclaim that they are followers of Jesus, but their life is marked by loving their own pleasure more than loving God, having none of the transformative power of the gospel at work in their lives. This list of vices marks out a culture of tolerance to sin, a culture that is embracing sinfulness. And it's into this culture that has embraced sinfulness, that the false teachers will finally get the traction that they're looking for. Look with me at verse 6. For among them are those who creep into households and capture weak women burdened with sin and led astray by various passions. This is how the false teacher operates. They target people who are weak in the faith. They target people who are burdened by sin. They target people who are already pursuing their own pleasures. They target people in that big culture of sinfulness. That is where their teaching gains traction. If they tried to teach their false doctrine among people who are well versed in the beauty of the gospel, who are faithfully following Jesus with dedicated lives to him, their teaching would be seen as false from a mile away. Paul even likens them to the 2 court magicians in Moses' day, who were part of Pharaoh's court, and they tried to conjure up tricks to replicate the miracles that God was performing through Moses in the presence of Pharaoh. Paul says that anyone could tell the difference between their cheap parlor tricks and the miracles of God. So while things will get more difficult for Timothy into the last days, Paul is also saying that those that know and love Jesus, those that follow him with lives dedicated to him, will be able to clearly see the difference between what is false and what is true gospel. And that's my hope for this study, that you will have a more robust understanding of how you can stand against that which is false.